Good evening, everyone. I'm Kaifeng, Dean of the School of Public Affairs Administration, or SPAA, at Rutgers Newark. It is truly an honor to welcome you to tonight's event, Future of Public Service, Challenges and Opportunities. Public service is the backbone of a thriving democracy. Yet in recent years, this essential pillar has encountered profound challenges: the erosion of trust, ideological polarization, political misinformation, strained resource, has put the very concept of public service under siege. As we continue to reflect on the outcome and implications of the most recent presidential election, tonight's conversation is not only timely, it's essential. You are fortunate to have some most insightful voices in the field here tonight with you to navigate those pressing issues. Before we immerse ourselves in tonight's program, I want to pause and acknowledge the incredible efforts that made this event possible. To the dedicated team and volunteers who worked tirelessly behind the scenes, thank you so much. I would also like to give special recognition to two individuals whose contributions were pivotal to the design of this program. Shanti Palmer, our Vice Chancellor for External and Government Affairs Relations at Rutgers Newark, and a proud alum of SPAA. So Shantae exemplifies the very best of public service, embodying the values and mission of SPAA in every aspect of her work. Thank you. Another individual is actually Dr. Marilyn Rubin, an She is an esteemed publication scholar, distinguished research fellow at SPAA, and her research dedication to public service has been inspiration for all of us. SPAA's mission to develop leadership, knowledge, and solutions for the public good is the driving force behind gatherings like this. With our motto, serving local communities, shaping global futures, we are dedicated to our community and to fostering meaningful dialogue, creative research to help the citizens of the great state of New Jersey. It's now my privilege to introduce someone whose leadership and dedication to our community embodies all those values, Dr. Bonita Veysey, our interim provost. Dr. Veysey has been a cornerstone of Rutgers Newark's success, serving in numerous leadership roles since 1998, including the Vice Chancellor for Planning and Implementation, a professor and interim dean, School of Criminal Justice. Dr. Veysey's academic credentials equally distinguished: a PhD in sociology, a master in rehabilitation counseling from University at Albany. Her research focuses on behavioral health, justice issues, particularly mental health and substance abuse treatment in prisons, jails. So her research has made great contribution to both scholarship and practice. So on behalf of SPAA, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to Dr. Veysey for her unwavering support and leadership, which continue to elevate our school and its mission. So please join me and give Dr. Veysey a warm welcome.
So first, wow, I'm not sure that I recognized me. Thank you, Tina, for your kind introduction. Good evening, everybody. On behalf of the Chancellor and the entire executive team, welcome to Rutgers University, Newark. How many of you are actually here already? Okay, a lot of us, okay. Will you please join me in thanking Dean Young and the School of Public Affairs for organizing this wonderful evening. And thank you to everyone here. Participating in one of the most pressing issues facing our nation and our communities today. We have some great speakers this evening, Lieutenant Governor Way and our three distinguished panelists. But before I turn this over to the Lieutenant Governor, I'd like to reflect for a couple of minutes on the future of public service. And please let me be clear, I am no expert. What I can say is that I have lived decades of public service. First as a civil servant for 10 years at the New York State Office of Mental Health, and now as a member of this wonderful Rutgers Newark community. I'd like to begin by using the public university, the one thing that I know the best, to discuss public service. The foundational ideas of a public university harken back to 1862. The federal legislation that established the land-grant universities. Yes, now remember your history. This was signed into law by Abraham Lincoln at the height of the Civil War. It's the Morrill Act. And the Morrill Act dedicated tens of thousands of acres to each state to establish colleges focused on teaching agriculture and engineering. And I quote, "In order to promote the liberal and practical education of the industrial classes in the several pursuits and professions in life." In essence, the Morrill Act was based on two broad principles. One, to improve the health and well-being of local communities through education and research, and two, to provide pathways to upward mobility for residents of those communities. That sounds like a great definition of the public good, right? So, as public servants whose mission is to support the public good, we have to ask ourselves, who is the public? Whether we agree on this or not, someplace deep down, we know our society is based on the relative social worth of groups of people. For example, what is the relative worth of children on the one hand compared to criminals on the other? Or how about the elderly versus immigrants? I want to highlight this because in some ways I believe that public service is the great equalizer. This is the space where the forgotten and the devalued are given voice and assisted. To maximize our investment in the public good, we must be aware of our own biases and actively choose to prioritize every member of what we call the public. So here at Rutgers Newark, we have thought deeply about this question. Those of you who are here and have been here for a while, you know we're deeply committed to the principles of the Morrill Act. That is, pathways to upward mobility and high-impact scholarship to improve community well-being. What does that look like? Even under the threat of the Supreme Court's reversal of affirmative action in college admissions, we are committed to leveling the playing field for all students. This means our continued support of things like the law school's minority student program and Run to the Top. That's our broad-based tuition assistance programs from students from Newark and Greater Newark and transfer students from New Jersey county colleges. It also means programs like the Garden State LSAM. So for those of you who don't know, the LSAM part is the Lewis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation that provides supports to increase participation and success of students from underrepresented groups in STEM fields. This is where I point out Montclair State, who is one of the partners in the Alliance and is, frankly, and to our shame, the most productive partner. So kudos over here to Montclair State. Research with practical implications also remains a priority. For example, the Rutgers Aging and Brain Health Alliance studies Alzheimer's risks among older Newark residents who are African American. New Geo is a new program that sounds a whole lot like the essence of the Morrill Act, so I'm just going to quote it. The Newark Geoscience Ecosystem is a transformative learning geo-ecosystem model uniting Newark-based institutions and organizations in the growth of a geoscience workforce prepared to solve urban environmental challenges through cross-sectoral collaboration. Kind of sounds like what we're supposed to be doing. Okay, so we're invested in the work, but I would be remiss if I didn't tell you a little bit about SPAA and what it has accomplished to support the public good. First, what it does is in the name, the School of Public Affairs and Administration. I don't know why I don't see this more often. This year, SPAA ranked number 7 in the country in urban policy, number 8 in public management and leadership, and number 10 in nonprofit management. That's across all public affairs schools in the United States. Really impressive. This is the place to go to get the best education if you want to become a well-rounded and effective public servant. We really have a gem here. Second, SPAA focuses substantial effort in helping New Jersey state and local governments improve their policymaking and operational efficiency. SPAA has delivered the state's certified public management program under the aegis of the Civil Service Commission since 2013. With this partnership, SPAA has helped train 1,171 state and local government managers. That's direct impact. My last point. Rutgers Newark is committed to improving the lives of all residents of Greater Newark, New Jersey, and beyond. We've done wonderful things for the public good, but these achievements would be impossible without state, legislative, and local support. The governor's office has been so supportive on enhancing educational pathways for New Jersey residents over time. And I'm particularly grateful for the legislation that provides access to financial aid to undocumented students so that they can attend college, and legislation that provides access to obtain professional licenses. Both of these are important and impactful pieces of legislation. We continue to receive support from the legislature for NJ STEP, our incredibly successful prison education program, the Rutgers Law School Center on Law, Inequality, and Metropolitan Equity, and the recently established Sheila Y. Oliver Center for Politics and Race in America. This evening's critical conversation could not be more timely. Our biggest challenge as we prepare to pivot to a new administration, with the emerging threats to civil service, the environment, education, health, and legal protections for various groups, will be how we stay the course. How do we continue to do the necessary work to serve the public good? So, excuse me. It's now my honor and pleasure to introduce Lieutenant Governor Tahesha Way. Lieutenant Governor Way has been a public servant for a long time. Early in her career, she worked as a lawyer and then as an administrative law judge. Nearly a decade ago, she was appointed to the Passaic County Board of Chosen Freeholders, and then in 2018 was sworn in as New Jersey's 34th Secretary of State. As you may all recall, in 2023, Lieutenant Governor Way was appointed, she was appointed Lieutenant Governor after the unexpected death of Sheila Oliver. One small note that I just confirmed. I want you to understand that I just met her. This is an amazing human being. So, small factoid. Do you know she taught literature at Fairleigh Dickinson? And she has a passion for teaching. She has a passion for direct impact on students. I think that is amazing. I think in my conversation with her, her desire to have an impact not only at the big scale, but on one-to-one level is absolutely profound and amazing. So, on behalf of the Chancellor, I personally welcome you to Rutgers Newark. I'm so happy you were with us tonight. Please welcome Lieutenant Governor.
Good evening. Good evening. Now, the interim provost, she gave a kind introduction, but she forgot to note that I started out my decades career at the age of 5. So here I am. Rutgers Newark, how are you feeling? It is always a pleasure to come to one of our state's greatest institutions. And before I begin, I just want to shout out and thank the Dean Yang, and of course, Interim Provost Veysey for the warm welcome and the opportunity to discuss the future of public service with all of you. Can we just show them some love, please? Yes, because cliche as it might be, the future of public service is right in this room. It is you. And I really want to frame this conversation towards our students in the room. See, I am a mom of 4 daughters who think I only graduated from kindergarten. So, you know, I always ask them to show up. And I know that every single one, including the students who are here, have shown up because they care. And it is fitting that we are here because Rutgers Newark just won our big democracy competition. 7 years ago, I launched the annual Ballot Bowl to invite New Jersey's college students to compete on behalf of their schools to see who can register the most voters and get the most commitments to vote during election season. And Rutgers Newark, you showed out. You won the conference and our new award, the Community Engage, which extends beyond your campus and into your communities. So show yourself some applause. Now, I know that after every election, people may feel despondent or want to check out because of their preferred candidate or policies didn't win. And look, trust me when I say I get that it is tough for some to even entertain this conversation less than 2 weeks after Election Day. But in my role as New Jersey's Secretary of State, I'm your chief election official, and the work of finalizing vote counts, auditing results for accuracy, and certifying them is still ongoing. And given that this work is actually the perfect time for me to remind each and every one of you that public service is so much more than just politicians campaigning or asking you for their vote. While we need principled elected officials who will step up and lead on our behalf, and I do hope some of you out here will be those future leaders, trust when I say there's so much more to being a public servant. For example, most of the folks securing voting machines, double-checking vote counts, coordinating ballot curing for mail-in ballots aren't elected officials. Rather, they are hired to do a job just to ensure that New Jersey's voters can cast their ballots freely, fairly, and without any interference. And for me, as I reflect on my own personal background, I was raised by two individuals who many wouldn't even consider to be public servants, but they were. My dad was a New York City bus driver who was so proud to deliver every single passenger safely to their destination, accident-free for his entire 25-year career. My mom was an Underground Railroad clerk who looked out for those in need, always grabbing an extra sandwich if she noticed a homeless person around her station that night. They taught me that many of our public servants are just regular people showing up for their communities with dignity and grace, making life a little bit better on their way. Now, I bet every one of us had a teacher, a coach who impacted them that way, or maybe you were fortunate to be alive just because a first responder took care of you in a medical emergency. Public servants are our everyday friends, neighbors, former classmates who decided that they could make a difference in some way. Now, it's true, I am worried that the climate we are in will discourage the very people who we need in public service. So for those who are willing, let me say I want to recruit you. Are y'all still with me? Good, because I wasn't going to come down from these stairs because I'm not done. We need thoughtful, compassionate, dedicated individuals who will put the work and put the people first. Those who will every day think through the many challenges that we are facing and how they can propel our communities, our state, our nation to be that North Star. And I want to make it clear and respectfully say this. You do not have to be that poli-sci major to work at this after graduation. I was an English and American Lit girl. So, if you're studying science or the environment, you could work at the State Environmental Protection Agency, conserving our natural resources, or at a government lab, helping us discover the next disease cure. If you are an accountancy major, you can help with programs like VITA, which provide free tax prep services to the underserved in our communities. I also bet there are some that you can actually meet on campus with a need. Like for me, just last year when I was an undergraduate at Brown, I'm just trying to see, and a few of my classmates, now this is true, and we reestablished the campus chapter of the NAACP because we needed a space to lift up Black students and build our respective community. So yes, be an active citizen. Be aware of what is happening around you, not just in the weeks right before an election. This is your space, your state, the place where decisions need to be made. We want you to be an impact, not so much here, but of course, even outside of New Jersey, leading into Washington. And if you're going to be an advocate, I humbly ask you be respectful. Meet people where they are. Don't let your passion lead you to acting in ways that undermine your message, your goals. You know, I was sometimes that shy little kid, and my mother would always remind me, Tahesha, just be present. It was shorthand for the idea that showing up for yourself was the first step. That you don't need to be the loudest, disrespectful person to have a presence. Rather, you can empower yourself and others just by listening and observing. I would also encourage each of you to find a mentor here on campus if you have not, and develop a relationship with him or her to discuss issues and concerns. I know mine was a dean. His name was Dean Perry Ashley. Dean Perry Ashley knew on campus that I was socially conscious and that I advocated for several causes. And he was the one actually who opened my eyes to becoming an attorney and understanding the power a law degree has in helping others. He also reminded me that I still could practice law, and at the same time, if an opportunity opened itself, which it did, to teach English in the college level. So I would encourage any student here to find a professor or someone in academic leadership who you can connect with and build that relationship. You never know how one conversation can change your perspective. So, as I close, whether you were happy about the results of the presidential election or not, I like to look at the glass half full instead of half empty. And with that being said, I firmly believe that if we act collectively, if we are laser focused, strategic in how we want to achieve a better society and future, public service has such full potential because we all have the power in whatever capacity we choose to build the future of our and others' dreams. So thank you for allowing me to address you this evening and enjoy the phenomenal panelists, including my dear colleague, Chair Chris Myers. Thank you so much.
Well, thank Governor so much. Very inspiring, very thoughtful. I was motivated. So the message is clear, showing up to serve. So that's a very clear message. And I think we are truly honored by her presence today. And we'll be delighted to welcome her back on campus again in the future to talk about the important ways state government is transforming itself and impacting the lives of New Jerseyans. So even she left, let's give her another loud round of applause. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce our distinguished guests, the panelists, and invite them to join us on stage. Our first panelist, Allison Chris Myers, the Chair and CEO of New Jersey Civil Service Commission, and a proud Rutgers alum. Chair Myers served as the state's foremost authority on all matters related to civil service. She has unparalleled expertise and insight into the challenges civil service faces today. As a researcher, I myself can only admire to have her depth of understanding when it comes to New Jersey's civil service system. So welcome. Our second panelist, Jonathan Koppell, President of Montclair State University, nationally recognized scholar of policy, organization, and management. Before joining Montclair State, he served as the Dean of Arizona State University's College of Public Service and Community Solutions and Vice Provost for Public Service and Social Impact. He's an elected Fellow of National Academy of Administration. I have long admired his entrepreneurial spirit. When we first met 15 years ago, he impressed me by speaking to me in Chinese about his brief trip to rural China. Our third panelist, John Bartle, President-elect of American Society for Administration and a distinguished professor at University of Nebraska, Omaha. John served as the Dean of UNO's College of Public Affairs and Community Service for 13 years and highly regarded scholar in administration. Like Jonathan, also elected Fellow of the National Academy of Administration. Needless to say, this is an extraordinary group of experts. So let's dive into the discussion. Our format will begin with 4 questions that I will pose to the panel, after which we are open to the floor for your questions. So let's get started. So I'm so excited to start this conversation. So my first question is, each of you has chosen a career in public service, a path that often requires personal sacrifice for the greater good. So what inspired you to enter this field? What does public service mean to you? What are the core values in your work?
So first, Kaifeng, it's great to be here with you on this panel, and to return to my roots as a public affairs dean with my colleagues. So I never thought about doing anything that didn't have a service component. My life story is in some ways the answer to that question. My father was in politics. When I was in utero, he was elected to public office, and my mother was a college professor. So my joke is that I'm like the least creative person in the world. So I basically averaged my parents and became a political science professor. But the truth of the matter is that when you grow up with that cultural surrounding, I just thought the point of having a life was to do something that made a difference in the world. And that wasn't just my father. I got it from both my grandmothers, who were also very public service minded. And so the question was, how could you make a difference? The sort of wrinkle, I think, for me was that I kind of early on said, if you ran universities in a different way, and you focused on the public impact of higher education, you can actually get a lot of stuff done. And I know John takes the same approach in his leadership in Nebraska. Yes, you can train people to get degrees, and yes, you can do research that not many people read. That was a joke. That's just reality, like own it. But you can actually torque the university to address all kinds of challenges in the community. And I'd be remiss, since I'm sitting at Rutgers Newark, to not mention that Nancy Cantor is somebody who was a pioneer in taking that model forward. And so public service is sort of in my DNA, literally, but I think it can be brought to a lot of venues that people don't necessarily think of as having the potential for public service impact.
Thank you. So it's in your DNA. Chair Myers?
I don't know if I have quite a similar story. I just basically needed a job. All kidding aside, I had worked many types of positions before I even attended college, and most of them were unskilled, laborer, worked in a factory, unloaded trucks, those types of things. And what I saw from my colleagues and from the different employers that I had was many times like abuse and people taking advantage of. And it's there that it could be just something simple as not paying the prevailing wage or making folks work more than 40 hours a week without overtime compensation. And I thought that I would love to be in some type of position where I can assist in empowering these individuals to know that they don't have to put up with this and to exercise and be part of a solution to make sure that people that are living day to day are not taken advantage of. And my first actual inclination really was to work in the Department of Labor because I felt that these individuals could assist with working folks and helping them ensure they get what they deserve for a good day's work. My life took a different turn. Obviously, I ended up going in the service, and it wasn't until I was out of the service that I actually attended college. And it's in college was really where the bug set in. I attended Rutgers College in New Brunswick, and at the time I attended, there was a very vigorous labor studies program, which was very employee, worker centric. And it just inspired me in such a way to learn and understand that there are organs of government that set policy to assist the voiceless, because doing so makes us all stronger for our communities and for ourselves. And that's really where I started to get the passion to do this. Unfortunately, I didn't really get the opportunity to work in government until about 10 years later. I put myself through Rutgers Law School at Camden at night while working in a private sector job, but always with that goal in mind to somehow be in a position of advocacy or assistance for regular folks trying to scratch out a living. And I've been able to do that since I've been gifted with working for the Department of Personnel, which is now the State Civil Service Commission, because we touch on every civil servant's life in some way. It doesn't matter if you're a social worker, police officer, a road repairer. How you are treated at your work has a direct influence on the services you provide your community, the vital public services that are provided to your community. And being able to help in small ways. I grew up through the appellate practice in the commission, and listening, all the things that the lieutenant governor spoke about, listening, small things, showing up, they go a long way. And it's very fulfilling because these are the folks that are responding on a 911 call, they're processing your license application, they're assisting our state residents that are most vulnerable in some of our Department of Health facilities. All of these things come together like in a beautiful orchestra, and it's wonderful to be part of that chorus in public service, to be able to assist, because all these things make our lives better, right? We depend a lot on the services of our government. We have a high expectation, and they need to be met. And that's really what civil service is all about at the end of the day, is ensuring that local and state governments have the tools to level the playing field, to balance the interest of ensuring folks are appointed based on their merit and fitness, as well as living with the consequences of elections in some sort of fair and impartial way. So I think that's really what kind of inspired me to public service.
I was like President Koppell. I was always interested in politics as a kid. Loved to read American history about politics, and my grandfather was a geologist, but he enjoyed it too. And I remember I would ask him about, well, tell me about this political party. What were they? All those kinds of things. When I went to college, I had a very influential high school teacher who taught history, but I learned later she was a PhD in economics. But back then, women, even with PhDs, didn't get to teach in college. So she taught high school, and she was a great teacher, and this was, of course, many, many years ago now. She still influences me in the way I think. I mean, it's just in my brain, the models that she taught us. And in college, and then in my first couple jobs in the public sector, I found that I was not as interested as I thought I was in the nitty-gritty of politics. Being around legislatures was interesting, but I didn't quite feel like it was the right place for me. And I did find, however, that doing research flipped my switch. I liked doing research, but I realized that there were these systems. In particular, as it happened, I did research early on the property tax, and I realized how the property tax is connected to everything. People's property tax burden, but also school finance, and on how the distribution of school aid is spread in every state. And it's different in every state, and it's important. Once I started to see that kind of a systems approach, it really lit a fire in me. And it's kind of, I'm pretty analytical in my thinking, and so I then kind of pursued that direction. And so it was that, the public service is multidimensional. And there are a lot of people, for example, think about in Washington, you think about a place like the Food and Drug Administration. Well, there's scientists who do testing. Are these drugs and food, are they ready to be consumed? Engineers in public works departments and so on. And so I think the public service touches all of us, as it should, because it is part of many different lives. And so I think it's not just for political science majors. It's also for engineers. It's for architects. It's for social workers. It's for people in criminal justice and so forth. And the one thing I would wish for is that people, and I think schools and public affairs administration do this well, but probably could do it better, that people who are not majoring in that area to take even just one course in that area, and they can realize, okay, maybe I will wind up in the public or nonprofit sector, and I can do something there, or maybe it's not my job, but I am a volunteer for a nonprofit, or I'm on my city council board or whatever it may be, and I can help there too. Public service doesn't have to just be your full-time career, it can be what you do, and that can include things as simple as coaching Little League, helping at your children's school. I mean, all of those things are public service. I would like to just jump to your next question. That might be a good bridge, which was about what does public service mean to you? And I'm going to cheat and use my book that was edited by Mark Holzer, former dean of the School of Public Affairs Administration here. And it's a great little book. It's called A Call to Serve. It's published by the American Society for Public Administration, which I'm president-elect of. And the quote is by Margaret Chase Smith. Probably not many of you know who she was. She was the first woman ever to serve both in the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. And she was elected to the House in, I think, 1946, and to the U.S. Senate in, I think, 1952. She was a Republican from Maine. And the quote is, My creed is that public service must be more than doing a job efficiently and honestly. It must be a complete dedication to the people and to the nation, with full recognition that every human being is entitled to courtesy and consideration, that constructive criticism is not only to be expected, but sought, that smears are not only to be expected, but fought, and that honor is to be earned, not bought. And I think, to me, that's the best expression of what public service is that I've ever heard.
I'm very impressed you actually have that little book. Thank you. So thank you all of you for sharing your wonderful personal stories and journeys. They're very touching. So I'm going to go to the next question about public service in the current political environment. So in light of the recent political developments, especially the outcome of the presidential election, how do you view the biggest challenges facing public service today? So that's a broad question. You want to go first?
You gotta have a time limit on this one. So, I, like a lot of people, have concerns about what the next administration is going to mean for public service. And by the way, not random speculation, but we actually, in this case, have some very clear indications of some of the priorities based on what the Trump administration 1.0 did, and the biggest effect on public service will be the assumed re-implementation of Schedule F. Given that you've got a lot of folks in the room here, part of the school, I think a lot of people probably know, but Schedule F was introduced by the Trump administration in the last year, which would have reclassified a large number of civil service positions as essentially political positions, which gives the administration the right to dismiss people in significant numbers. By the way, there's nothing wrong with having political appointees. There are a lot of them. Most of them are Schedule Cs. I actually was a Schedule A, which is a different kind. But there's a need for appointees that serve at the pleasure of the president in order for the administration to be politically responsive to the people who elect them. That actually is important, even in a system where we believe in the professionalism and the neutrality of the engineers and the scientists and a lot of the people who deliver the mail and drive the buses and so on. We want them to be professionals, not to be awarded their jobs on the basis of a spoils system. But we also want government to be politically responsive. So there's the balance that has always been the case between political and professionalism at all governmental levels. It certainly seems to be the case that the balance is going to shift substantially under a Trump administration, and the signals of the initial appointments feed that idea, that it's more about loyalty to the president, political alignment, than it is about qualifications in a particular field. And to link it to the theme of tonight, rather than a general Jeremiad against Project 25 or whatever, my concern is that many people who would have been attracted to a career in public service at the federal government, which is an incredibly attractive career path in a lot of different ways, that many people will be deterred. My concern is also that many people who currently are employees in federal public service will jump ship. And we are going to see a quantum loss of capacity and competency from people who say, I don't want to work in a place where I'm at the mercy of a political decision-making calculus. Now, we saw some of this in the first administration, and some people chose to stay because they believed very much in the mission and in the service and everything that your quotation nicely encapsulates. But a lot of those people have since left, and I think the exhaustion that a lot of people feel is real. And so I'm very concerned that we're going to see a real hollowing out of the federal public service, in addition to the politicization of the agencies. I am constitutionally an optimistic person, so let me suggest there's a flip side to that. I think there will be a very strong interest in local government and in local public service. And in my observation, and I'm interested in what other people in this room think, in my observation, I already was seeing in students a greater attraction to local government than national service or even state service. And I believe that's because it's because there's a reward in seeing the results of your service in a tangible, palpable way in the places where you live. And while yes, you can abstractly know that you're having an effect on 300 million people when you make policy change at the federal level, there's something different about seeing a block in your city come to life. There's something different about seeing the schools serving the children in your community improve. There's something different about seeing housing units that are affordable go up in your city. That is all much more rewarding in some level, even than a significant change at a federal level. So I optimistically hope that we will see not just a non-decline, but even a surge in local government, and in particular, I agree with John, public service isn't just government service, although there's been I think there's been a disparaging of government service in favor of other forms of public service, but I think that there's going to be a tremendous surge of interest in people serving through nonprofits, community organizations, and so on, as individuals look for productive ways to channel their frustration and their dispiritment, I don't know if that's a word, because I think that people fundamentally would rather be productive than lament what isn't going on. So I think that the future of public service is quite complicated. I think there's going to be an intentional assault on some of the norms that have taken root, but there will be a counterbalance. It's worth in times like this, I really do believe this, to recognize that nothing in history is new. And this idea that the government should be this bastion of neutral expertise, that's a relatively new idea. And so the idea that you can't have government and government can't function in a system that is partisan and that is all rewards-based, that's just historically not true. It turns out that competence in government is something that voters value, and they punish people who are not competent. Definitely, this is an older folks example, but ask Jane, the mayor of Chicago, Jane Byrne. Ask Jane Byrne how important it is to have good snow plows clearing the streets after a storm. That's the most famous example. But that there is a consequence to competence in the public sector, and I believe that we can still maintain values of public service even under trying circumstances. That's the optimist in me. Not always. That's not the voice I always speak with, but I think that has to be retained, because otherwise, this sort of full desperation mode doesn't really get us anywhere.
So, I can really only speak to the state and local potential, what I would suspect may be the effects of this, and I have to agree wholeheartedly with Dean. Because if the talent pool isn't attracted to federal service, that's great for us in local service, because ain't nothing gonna happen in New Jersey public service, at least as long as I'm around, as long as Governor Murphy's around. Okay? We are one of the few states where civil service is actually ingrained in our organic law. It is in the state constitution. So depending on the administration coming in, there's a lot of ways they can monkey around with things, but our organic base is immune to a lot of those things that Schedule F would target, and at least our state executive branch, and for those jurisdictions that have opted into civil service. Okay. What I fear is that if everything sort of starts in a wave effect, well, federal civil service really started in the 1880s, right? But it didn't trickle down into the states, or at least in New Jersey, until 1908, okay? So if there is if this type of movement sort of emboldens our future state leaders to try to weaken our particular form of civil service protections would be my area of concern. And I think that there is a very strong tradition in the state of New Jersey to have that balance that the Dean was talking about, right? Elections do have consequences. And whoever wins gets to set the priorities in the agenda, right? But it's important to have a strong civil service in order to deliver the goods every day. And I think the residents of New Jersey are savvy enough to not expect anything less. Okay, so my fear is that maybe a future state administration may try to follow suit if that gets any legs in the federal service. I would certainly hope it doesn't. But I think for the next few years, the state of New Jersey and its municipalities and counties will be in a good position as a result of this.
My hope is that we have a principled discussion about values, and that I think it's fine for a conservative government to come in. I think there's that balance between conservative and liberal, left and right. My fear is that it will be about revenge and vengeance, and that's never good. I mean, school children know that. And so my hope is that we are able to then have reasonable discussions about programs and policies, and are they serving, the goals that they're supposed to or not. I was in Washington when the Reagan administration came in, and a lot of people then it's kind of similar to the way it is now. A lot of people said, oh my God, he's going to get rid of all these departments and all these agencies, and everyone's going to get fired and so forth. That didn't happen, and it was a largely reasonable discussion about priorities, and it did shift the way we spent money, more on defense, less on social programs. And also, I think one thing that's really important for the state and local levels is I think there will be a number of programs that will be delegated to the states. I think states are going to be a lot more important now. I mean, they've always been very important. I think more money will be coming to the states. And so I would say state government is going to be a heck of a good place to work, I think, in the near future. And of course, if you're sympathetic to Trump's perspectives, then there'll be a lot of jobs there too. And so I think that's kind of the key. If there can be a discussion based on the principles, what I do worry about, and I'm not a foreign policy expert at all, but I do worry a lot about what at least President-elect Trump has said about letting Vladimir Putin do what he wants, doing whatever the hell he wants, I think was a quote, about cozying up to North Korea, about, perhaps leaving NATO in the Paris Climate Accord. We are very, very important in the world. And if we are not there, then a lot of things could fall apart, because the United States, the strength of the economy, the strength of our moral leadership is very important, and we cannot shirk that. And so, again, people say things on the campaign trail they don't necessarily mean, so we'll see. But I think that's one thing that I think is terribly important for everybody in the world.
Well, thank you. I guess we all worry about federal bureaucracy, especially when Office of Public Personnel is having problem filling all those positions. But we are lucky, we are in the Garden State, so we are relatively in a better position. But of course, we face some challenges. Those challenges are probably the same case around the world. So my third question relates to that, is that when we face such diversity of values, polarization, how can we make public service more effective and trusted? And relates back to Jonathan's comments, is how do you make the right balance between being politically responsive and neutral expertise? Neutrality that's so vital to public services. So how do you make the right balance in this time of this is a difficult time?
We're going to mix it up instead of him going. I think that's the key question. There needs to be a balance between political responsiveness and professional expertise. And I think it depends on the position. I grew up in Illinois. Illinois is kind of like New Jersey politically. There was a patronage system then. And I had a summer job working in the driver's license bureau because I was in the right political party. So that was actually my first job in government, was working at the driver's license bureau. Those kind of jobs, fine if they're patronage appointments or political appointments. I think there are a variety of jobs where you want a political appointment. And of course we have cabinet level, but then, a certain way down. However, I don't think any of us want an engineer without qualifications to design the bridge that we're going to drive on going home. Or that the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, is, somebody who, whatever, worked for Frito-Lay or something like that. I mean, that's not what you want. You don't want your doctor to be, you don't care whether they're a Democrat or Republican. You want them to be the best doctor you can have. Everybody feels that way. So I think there are some jobs where if it is more political, okay. I mean, that's not the end of things. Other jobs, I think it's totally unacceptable. And so I think that'll be the key. And I think for students in public administration, listen carefully in your classes about these things, because these are the kind of decisions that are going to be made. Public administration will be remade in front of your eyes, and the textbooks that you have will help guide you in understanding the context that that's in. So I think there's a lot of good potential out there. I would also say at the federal level it takes ridiculously long to hire people, and it's very difficult to fire people. And most people I know in Washington agree that, yeah, we need to change on that. We need to improve that. For example, I'm in Nebraska, and our state government, we're an at-will state. So, and I was a dean, and if I wanted to fire somebody, I could, unless they were a tenured professor. In which case, I could still get at them and get them out. There are some people who are not productive, and you want to fire some people, or at least, get them on a performance improvement plan in their work. So there might be some good things that come out of this. And I think that's what we need to do, is to applaud the positive moves and to thoughtfully critique the bad moves.
Sure. I think that's the role of any lowercase civil servant during the change of administration. You have to have that balancing act, right? You have to be neutral, but you also have to answer to whoever your bosses are. And the way we've always tried to do it, at least in my agency, is I would tell the incoming decision makers, okay, this is how we've done things, and here's the statutory and regulatory basis for it. These things are jurisdictional, that are vetted in statute. Here's what we can do. Here are the things that are regulatory. this is what the last administration did with this. Maybe the prior administration had a different slant on this. You see, our role as civil servants is to provide fair and neutral information to the incoming decision makers. That's the bottom line, and that's the way the system's supposed to work, right? The bureaucracy can't become the fourth unelected branch of government. But what I think, and I'm certainly no expert, the federal leviathan of the Office of Personnel Management, but what I think the concern is where you say somebody should not have tenure protections. Where is that goalpost? That's sort of what's in flux from this Schedule F, right? And that's what's dangerous, because when you're looking at these different things that come before you as in any change of administration, where do you find that balance? And how do you advise? And that can be tough, because sometimes the folks that are coming in are going to want you to do things that you know you have been challenged on before in the courts, or it's flat out against the law, and you're stuck in this situation to what do you do, right? And you always try to give solutions that are legally defensible. It's another way of saying, okay, Bounce, what can we do to meet your policy goals? Because you got to remember, a lot of the things that any government agency does is controlled by some enabling statute someplace, some regulation somewhere. And to deviate from that, you got to go through a process. And that's where you have to make your case. That's where you come in as civil servants to do this. Okay?
So let me say, if you don't care about the climate, if you don't care about equity and some other things, this is a great time to be a scholar of public administration. So, it's like I can get a little punchy. But it actually is true, because it's easy to have a bunch of conclusions in our field which we treat as axioms based on an assumption that the partisan alignment of power never shifts. So less than a year ago, a bunch of lefty types were lamenting the Supreme Court's decision regarding Chevron, the Chevron doctrine. And for those of you who don't know about this, you should familiarize yourself with it. And we're concerned that the Supreme Court was basically saying the administrative branch had used too much discretion, too much power, and blamed it to some degree on Congress and said, you can't let the unelected bureaucracy just write regulations, right? That's a political function that you've delegated too much. And people were saying, oh my God, this is terrible, they've overturned Chevron. Doesn't look so bad right now. And saying that actually the power to make regulations and the power to effectively make law needs to be held by Congress, that's actually correct in my view. And it puts some pressure on Congress to actually take back the responsibilities that, in my view, they've abdicated to the executive branch. And so now we're going to see that tension play in real time, where you have an administration which is going to try and do things very different than the Democratic administrations to really engage in the rulemaking process or the unrulemaking process. And the question is, what's going to happen in Congress? Yes, controlled by one party, but not unified around a lot of the issues that are at stake here. And 2 years from now, there may be a different control, at least in the House of Representatives. And so you're going to start to see in real time not just politics, but real tension over the nature of public administration and the nature of authority in a system of divided of divided power? I think that's very interesting. There's a variety of other questions, which again, I know got a lot of public administration students here. The question of what is sometimes called monkey wrenching, when bureaucrats purposely basically are malfeasant and undermine the commands of their politically appointed leaders. That becomes a really interesting question of when do you think it's okay for an unelected bureaucrat to not refuse to do the work exactly, but do the work incompetently on purpose. By the way, a tactic that's been used around the world for eons. And so that becomes a real question, which is completely at odds with the stated ethics of public administration, right? And yet, maybe not at odds with people's personal ethics and your belief in the sort of greater good. So, as I say, a very interesting time to be studying public service. I can't help but take one privilege, since you talked about the global community, and this is an area where when I used to be a professor and got to actually be intellectual and think about things and write things, I'm very interested in global institutions. And so the bookend to my point about local government is actually that there's, I think, an increasing interest and opportunity for people to have influence through transnational organizations, including transnational organizations that don't depend on nation states as the building blocks. Because people will say, well, how is that going to work if you have an administration that is threatening to pull out of NATO and that is undermining some organizations? There are organizations out there that are not state-centric, and I would urge you, this is my pitch since I'm talking to public administration students, to pick up something that I think is understudied. International rulemaking organizations have a tremendous impact on the way we live our lives. And so if we think about climate, for example, there's something called the International Organization for Standardization, ISO. All of you probably have something in your possession right now that has an ISO number on it, which has to do with the standards governing the production of pretty much everything from the screws in your watch to your shoes to chemicals in all the products that you use and eat all the time. And through ISO, we can control, as humanity, the types of stuff that we're putting out into the atmosphere. Incredible power that really doesn't depend upon the US government. And so I think you're going to increasingly see public service and public administration power diffuse down to local government, to state government, but also diffuse up to these transnational organizations that have a huge effect in our lives without even us being aware of it. So this, I think, ends up being a fantastically interesting time for public administration and public service. It's scary, and I'm not blind to the fact that that interestingness can lead to really harmful effects that have long-term consequences. But the reality is this is a time to really dig on things. It's because it's like you shook up a snow globe and now things are in motion that aren't always in motion. And that's a great time to study the dynamics that we're all interested in.
Thank you. I guess the comments really make me feel a little bit more optimistic, because I see students from China, from Chile, and from India, from Korea. When you think about in other countries how they balance political responsiveness and professional neutrality, I think, okay, we are doing an actually good job. And especially sometimes I agree with Allison, it comes down to whether we have a strong constitutional democracy. I mean, that ultimately that matters to us. So I think you think about it, we should be optimistic, and we have strong society, we have strong state and local governments. So, but let's go to our fourth question. Is about future public service leaders. So we look to the future. Why should young people still consider a public service career, given the political environments today? I mean, what is the role of universities in helping us?
I think the role, the future of public service relative to our students, it's critical that you get involved now and get in on the ground floor, because you will be the future policy influencers and makers. Okay. There's when we were talking earlier about the immediate benefits of why you might want to work in local government after everything that's going on with the state government. And it reminded me of something that I learned a long time ago. And there was the United States had a Speaker of the House of Representatives. His name was Tip O'Neill. And he always said that all politics is local, right? And by getting involved locally with these policy issues that are important to you, we still live in a republic, right? A constitutional republic, and you will be able to engender change from the ground up. You're the folks with the passion. You're the folks with the knowledge. You're the folks that can see what's happening now, what's happening in the past, to help us forge a better future. And in New Jersey, we have systems that we have set up, different programs to try to encourage young folks to get involved in our state governments. We have a Governor's Fellows Program, we have the Clemency Fellows Program to get individuals, young individuals, into policy research making types of decision structures within our agencies to help us chart a new course. So the time can be very exciting. There's a lot of scary things going on federally, but I think it opens up a lot of opportunity for, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to deal with this in the future? What can we do now of a positive nature in order to improve this? So public service is very attractive for a young person to get in my view, because the time is now.
I think you got to look to the horizon. We're in this for the long game, and especially young people, you're going to have long careers. So, whatever happens over the next 4 years, as Dr. Koppell says, you're going to learn a lot, and maybe some of the things will be bad, but it is a great time to apply what you're learning in public administration and to see how things work. Keep in mind, I really think that the Madisonian system that we have of checks and balances is going to be stressed, but it's going to be very important. And the whole idea, remember, the founders of the Constitution, they were reacting to the king, and they wanted to move away from executive dominance. And what is the first article of the Constitution? It's Congress. Second article is the president. Why is that done? Because in their mind, the legislative assembly was more important. That was the heart of democracy. And over time, we have extended democracy further and further. Most of the amendments to the Constitution after the Bill of Rights are about extending franchise to black folks, to women, to people under 18, and so forth. And so this has broadened democracy. And I think seeing how, I think one of the key tests is the recess appointment idea. The idea that President-elect Trump might get Congress to recess, and apparently there's some way that the president can do it. I just was reading about that today, and the article didn't explain how. I'm sure it's a very arcane, detailed rule. But if President Trump would be successful in making some of his cabinet appointments as recess appointments, and if the Republican senators, they have enough votes, of course, if all the senators stick to it, then that can happen. But if not, then if there's enough that don't agree with that, then that may not happen. So I think those are going to be really key tests early on basically whether, in this case, the Senate gives its power to the president. And again, following up what Dr. Koppell said, this is a, balance of power. You learn about it when you're in grade school, right? Or maybe at least in high school. And this is really where it's going to happen. This is where we're really going to see how that balances out, as well as the courts as well. And then, of course, the federal system, federal, state, and local. So it'll be some real hardball politics going on here. And, I think the principles that we have in this country, the principles that you learn in civics, and by the way, I will say, I think it's a shame that most school districts don't even teach civics anymore. I think that's one thing that needs to change. But the principles that you learn in political science classes, public administration classes, those are really going to be tested. And again, you may be emotionally involved on one side or the other, but it's really going to be a tremendous learning opportunity.
So, again, if you didn't care about the substance of any of this, fascinating time to observe, right, in terms of the design question. So the framers of the Constitution said this whole thing is really great, we've got checks and balances. It's all great, as long as you don't have one political party centrally controlled in charge of all three branches. Then it won't work so well. So we're gonna find out. We're gonna find out what that is, right? Can a strong president muscle the Senate along? So I don't want to focus on that because it's covered well. I want to answer the last part, Kaifeng, which you talked about. What is universities' roles? So I very much believe that universities, like Montclair State University, like the University of Nebraska, like Rutgers University, they were created to serve American democracy. Let me just focus on Montclair. I mean it quite specifically. We, like pieces of Rutgers and other state universities, we were created to train teachers. Like we were Montclair Normal School. That's what a normal school is. And teachers were considered building blocks of American democracy because, after all, how could you have a citizenry participate in elections and all this sort of stuff if they couldn't read and they couldn't participate in any discourse about what was going on? It didn't make any sense. You had to have public education in order to have a democracy, and in order to have public education, you had to have teachers. So from our starting point, we were viewed as a building block for democracy. So we need to take that responsibility seriously. That means educating people. We need to fill the gap that John just talked about in terms of the intentional hollowing out of civics education in the K-12 sphere. That's why I saw a statistic. It was actually pretty funny in its snarkiness on a news channel. It said, it was really good. It said 65% of Americans can name all three branches of government. All three. By the way, that was still only 65%. Part of what's happened now in our country is because we've bled knowledge about the practice of democracy out of our population. We, particularly public universities, but I would include all universities in that, we have a responsibility to fill that back in. And to bring and create an educated citizenry that can participate in an informed way. We have a responsibility to encourage our students and others to be active participants in civic life. That doesn't mean only work for the government. I very much believe that public service can take all forms. When I was at my previous institution, we started something called Public Service Academy, which was to prepare people, in some ways think of it as ROTC for civilian public service, so 4 years of training. Only a small percentage, maybe 20% of the students in that program were from my College of Public Service. The biggest majors were engineering and business. And the idea was to prepare people to work public service into their lives. That's what we as universities need to be doing. And everybody in here who's obviously interested in public service, because otherwise why would you subject yourself to this? You have a responsibility to infuse other people with that interest, because otherwise it's just us talking to ourselves, and that really doesn't work, right? That's not gonna keep people behaving in accordance with the norms, because there'll be no punishment for breaking from those norms. So I think we have an enormous role to play. I will say this, in my experience, Younger folks are very service-oriented and very much interested in the world. We do a great disservice when we reinforce the idea that the only reason somebody goes to college is to get a job that pays them the most money they can. That's just not true. I mean, it's tangibly false. There are students at Montclair and Rutgers and UNO who want to be teachers, and they want to be social workers, and they want to be nurses, and they want to be counselors. They don't think they're going to be Bill Gates, right? It's not because they're stupid and think that social workers are rich. It's because they want to have a life of meaning, and they want to feel like they make a difference in the world. And so we should not only honor that, but cultivate that. That ultimately is the key to democracy, and if universities don't embrace that role, and we sort of retreat and cover our heads and hope that nobody comes for us, then frankly, we deserve what comes to us. So I feel very strongly that we have to be on the right side of history here and speak up for American democracy.
Thank you. I know we are running out of time, but since we have such wonderful panels, I would like to open the floor and to questions.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jenny Marie Drobo. I'm actually a Montclair alum, and I'm here with the GEM Project, getting information from everyone and meeting everyone. I have a couple questions. I want to keep it short. How are you, as leaders, being prepared to handle the increased complexity of public service in a political divide, and how can you embrace us as in students? I'm not currently a student, but those who are, and myself, during this journey.
Complex, challenging problems are interesting, and I think smart people are drawn to them. A lot of people in the public service, as Dr. Koppell said, are not there for the big money. They're there because they want to make things better, but also there's a challenge, an intellectual challenge that they're trying to get at. And social worker, I mean, part of it is taking care of that person now. But then macro social work is about changing the system so that more people can get help. It's not just one person at a time, that you can do something that helps a broad range of people. Same thing in any discipline, engineering, law, and so forth. I think that's the opportunity. It's a challenge, of course, but that's really the opportunity that I think people have. And that's where you really can change the world. And maybe it starts out small, but we all can think of, I'm thinking of faculty here, programs that have worked in our community, and then you've written something about it, and then it gets picked up by other people. Other communities, other states do it. I was talking earlier about a program that we have in Nebraska for young people who are both in the social welfare system and also in the criminal justice system. And of course, they have a social worker working with them, and then they have typically a parole officer working with them. And the problem that came out, one of the judges in our county said, "Can't you people talk to each other and sit down and figure out what's best for this kid?" And so that was the program. And they did it, and it worked. Our researchers wrote it up. It was in a journal. Georgetown University picked up on it, and they had, sessions and conferences, and basically, so here's an idea and let's spread it. Universities do this all the time, and by God, we should. And so, first of all, that I think is what public affairs faculty do really well, is to spread good practice and how to make better practice. And second of all, I think we need to bring along some of our colleagues who are in the more, if you will, pure disciplines. So get an engineer to help you on something, or a biochemist or something like that. So the opportunities are there with local government in particular. I mean, you can just walk right down to the city council meeting and have an effect. Your neighborhood association, which isn't a government, but again, it's public service, and so on. So the opportunities are all over the place, and all you got to do is find them and and make them happen.
I think we do a mixed job of preparing people in schools of public administration to deal with the politics. I mean, John alluded to it. I think actually local government programs do a better job because they generally build in something about like how do you deal with the council. And I know a lot of places do something that we did at my school of public affairs in Arizona, which is focused on local government, where they have like simulated hearings where you have the people there and then like, what's it like to be the city manager and everybody starts screaming at you. And then and somebody always play acts the person who like brings up random stuff and is kind of a little off because you have to learn to deal with that. That's part of being in government is dealing with the politics. There's some discussion of how do you navigate like a disagreement, political disagreement between your council members. I think that in the current environment, we need to educate people to prepare for a whole different level of stuff. How do you deal with being doxxed? Like that's what's happening now to public servants. They're getting doxxed for the positions that they're taking or getting harassed. And so how do you prepare people for that? How do you prepare for being vilified by political opponents as the enemy? Not somebody I disagree with, but the enemy, a traitor. I don't think we've gotten there as public administration. John knows better the curriculum than I do. So I think there's probably some adaptation to the world as we know rather than the world as we wish it was in terms of preparing people for service. It's a great question.
Another. And I'm actually speaking on behalf of some of my fellow colleagues and Professor Warner, who is right there. She teaches managing public organizations, and Professor Davey, which I recognize, he mainly talks about what it is like for public administrators such as yourselves to know what the careers are. So my question to you is, how do you maintain so loyal to your character while also teaching future public administrators such as myself, while also trying to stay what many people be not considered to be the enemy?
Well, I guess the what pops into my head, you got to just do what you think is right. I mean, I know this is a simplistic answer, but you've got to follow the path that you think is the right path, and not compromise that as you make decisions that have to satisfy the political demands of the moment, right? Which isn't to say that you always do your first choice. Right? But you can't twist yourself into knots to satisfy the politics of the moment and do something that's fundamentally at odds with your principles. So I do think it's important if you're going into any job which has public responsibilities where you're constantly facing criticism. I will tell you, and this is particularly true over the last year, I know that a lot of the stuff I do, I'm going to get barraged by criticism. A lot. Pretty much no matter what I do. And so I just have to make sure that I'm comfortable with what I'm doing. Because otherwise you have no place to ground your decision. And I think that's true for a lot of people. And by the way, that's why a lot of people sometimes resign. Because when confronted with doing something that is fundamentally at odds with their beliefs, versus their ethical responsibility to follow the order, or whatever, their professional responsibility to follow the orders of somebody who's a duly elected, they're like, I can't reconcile these two things, and so I shouldn't be in this position. I get that, I respect that. So I think you have to have a North Star that's internal to your own beliefs, or you will be unable to answer that question, because there will be no basis to choose left or right.
I totally agree. At the end of the day, you have to be able to look at yourself in the mirror. You know, everybody essentially works for themselves, believe it or not. And if you can't in good conscience continue on or execute a policy that you just can't live with, the decision that you have to make is yours alone, right? If you can't live with it, you maybe have to move on. Because at the end of the day, you have to live with yourself. And I don't really think there's too much more I can add to what you said, because I think you're spot on, Jonathan.
Yeah, I would say that you want to look for a compromise. And there may not be an opportunity, but it really, I mean, people always say one of the most important things is listening. That's why you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. And that's really true. Most of the time, I have learned that what a group of different people on different sides of an issue, that they don't necessarily want the same thing. That you can give person A what they want and person B what they want, and it's not that A and B, have to fight and one wins, one loses. Of course, that doesn't always happen, but if you know the issue well enough and you listen carefully and really ask, what is it, what would be your desired outcome? What would you like to see happen here? And if you can get people to articulate that, then you're part of the way there. And then you can think about it, fashion a compromise, and you can say, well, what about this? What if we did this? Would this work? Now, again, that's what you hope for. It doesn't always happen. But where you can do that, then that is what I like to call a transcendent compromise. It's not just splitting the differences. It's we're going to make something better, and we're going to do it in a way that appeals to both values. Or again, maybe more than 2. So I think that's the goal. And in my time as dean, one of the things I learned was most faculty didn't necessarily want to win on the issue. What they wanted was to be right. Right? Yeah, right? Yeah. And so, like, okay, and I would say sometimes, Jonathan, you really were right about that. I'm sorry we didn't do what you said, but
I'm sorry we have to go a different direction.
Yeah. But and so once you realize, and some of it came. One of my big things when I was younger was I played rugby, and I became the president of the Minnesota Rugby Union, and I realized that what certain teams wanted was not the same thing as other teams wanted. So I could give each of them what they wanted, and then and then move on from there, and everybody was happy. And so here it is. I mean, this is not public service in the strict sense, but any group you're in, any hobby you do, any student group that you're involved in, there's an opportunity to lead and to help do things like that to make things better. And people say, take these opportunities when you're in school. They really are true. And I was talking to a group of city managers in Ohio recently, and I said, what are you looking for when you're hiring entry-level management person? And we say, and they said, customer service. I said, you mean that, what do you mean specifically? They said, look, if they've been a waiter or waitress, that's a really good background because they know how to keep people happy, they know how to serve people, and we can teach them all the other stuff. But if they don't have that kind of ethic of service, then it's not going to work. And I thought it would be, we need skills in budgeting and personnel and policy analysis. No, they didn't need that stuff. So.
One last question. I know Marilyn is assuming the cell phone was the time, but one last question, yes.
Thank you to our panelists for talking to us. I guess I will represent the PhD students, not to be outdone by the MPA student. Now, I wanted to ask that in an age where the debate rages on the relevance of the debate in the public domain rages about the relevance of going to college, how do we reimagine the teaching of public administration in such a way that attracts students? Because if you're going to have more and more students, probably not going to college, and then you have all the other, disciplines that are trying to vie for this small group of college students. How do we attract them to be able to study public administration and service? Thank you.
Good question. It's maybe kind of the key question of the day for schools of public affairs. I really think it's the opportunities, the excitement of the opportunities. And as I mentioned, of course, any department wants more majors, but even getting students to take one class and to realize what they can do. For example, I've been recently doing some consulting at Ohio State University, and they have an undergraduate minor in public management and one in nonprofit management, and they're thinking about doing, and I think they have one in local government. And I said, local government, stop and think about this. Engineers, many of them go to work in local government, civil engineers in particular, architects, social workers, and so on, health, public health. And if you have one course in management, you learn a lot. I thought I don't need to know that stuff. I know econ, and I know public finance and all that. Well, I took my first public management course in my MPA program, and I realized, oh wow, if I had known this earlier, I would have been much better, much more effective. And so many people in those jobs want to have the opportunity to lead, to manage an organization. And I think helping people see that this will help them, first of all, get a job in that area, and then, of course, be more effective in the job. It's absolutely true. And then once you establish those kind of connections, I think you can, it's word spreads, students talk. And so that's one simple thing I would suggest.
So I think there's actually two interesting questions in there. One is this idea that actually both candidates said right before the election, which is government jobs shouldn't require a college degree. Which then presses the question, what is it that we thought before a college degree gave a graduate that was important to going into government service? So I think that's an interesting question. I think there are probably jobs where a college degree comes in handy, and there are probably more of them than not. But I do think that for we in the sort of higher education industrial complex, simply relying on people to make a college degree a requirement, which absolved us of asking the question, what is it that we are giving people that makes it important for them to have it? That was a crutch that if it gets taken away, it's not the worst thing in the world. Now the second question, which would be implied by the first, which is, well, if you don't need a college degree, and certainly you don't need a college degree in public administration or in something public service related in order to get a government job, what's the pitch for majoring in one of these subjects? I think the answer to that has to be, and by the way, I agree with everything John said in terms of the practical value, but I think one thing that we as a field have neglected, and this is a challenge that comes with the increased professionalization of undergraduate degrees, is how does this subject, apart from preparing you for a job, help you to understand the world? Right? Because that, after all, is what a liberal arts education is supposed to be about. That it's supposed to help you understand the world. And so I think that what we need to do in schools of public affairs is advertise to students, if you want to know what the hell is going on around you and sort of why things are the way they are, you need to have some insight into all of this stuff. Like, who are these people? And what do they do, right? So I loved your story about you were motivated because you saw workers being mistreated and said, this sucks. But if you said to most people, like, okay, well, where do you go in the government to do something about that? Your initial answer is the Department of Labor, right? Well, that's actually semi-true, but it took you a while to find the right spot. So people don't know. If you ask people who to call if you've got a problem with this, on this very basic level, they mostly don't know. Like, oh, it's a school thing. Well, do I call the governor? No, that's a school board. Well, does that work for the mayor? No, that's somebody different. Huh? Right? So I think that we have done crummy job at advertising to people who don't want to go into this as to why this is useful knowledge. And if jobs not requiring a college degree motivates people to sell it a little bit better, well, I guess that's a silver lining. That's a silver lining on a cloud. But we've forsaken that, and I understand why it seems boring, because if they think it's only preparation for somebody who's going to be an assistant to the deputy budget manager, they're like, well, I'm not going to do that, and so I don't care. So there's an opportunity to improve the way we make it more broadly appealing.
So I kind of come at it maybe from a little different perspective. College degrees are wonderful. They are great things. But the value of experience can be equated in many cases to equivalency of a college degree. And about 2 years ago, Governor Murphy recognized this in Executive Order 327, which required our agency, who maintains the state classification plan, to prioritize experience over education for our professional titles. Now, when I say professional titles under the state classification plan, that just means a generic bachelor's degree. For those titles we've determined previously that require, at a minimum, a possession that the candidate possess some type of bachelor's degree. So I think there's always great things that you can glean from experience that contribute to the excellence of public service, as well as what you can get from a degree as well. What we're looking for is, ultimately, we serve all kinds of constituents, a diverse public, and we want our employees to have diverse backgrounds. That includes those with an academic experience, as well as those who have gained expertise maybe by working their way up the food chain. So that's just my little difference on this.
All right, thank you so much. I think we don't have extra time, but we have future events. We can discuss more in depth on the issues. So I'm going to sit here and sort of conclude. So let's give the panelists another round of applause. So our panelists have shared their deep insights into the challenges and opportunities of public service. I think that we have very rich conversations. And one recurring thing is how important public service is to transform lives and communities. I think the message from John was clear. Public service isn't just a job, it's a calling. It's rooted in the commitment to integrity, fairness, equity, and belief in the common good. So that's so important to what we do. We are also reminded of the urgency to strengthen public service in the times of great change. The challenges are vast, but so are the opportunities. I'm also very optimistic because we have our students. And I hope the discussion tonight inspired our students to think more boldly about your role in public service. You are the future leaders, problem resolvers. You are the policymakers. You are shaping the future policies, practices of tomorrow. It's because of you I feel more confident about what we do. I know the work ahead might be very demanding, but as you have seen today, that the rewarding is so much. And if you know me, if you get to know me, and I'm the kind of guy, if we have pressure, if we are in hard times, I get excited, I get motivated, right? We have to fight. mean, that's the message we always have to give to our students. And as a result, I totally agree that public affairs schools, we have a responsibility to help train our students, democratic agents, to move things along. And so in the future, if you, my colleagues, if you receive another email 2 a.m. in the morning, don't complain again, because I cannot fall asleep. I know we have to train our students better. We have to design better programs to make better connection, to make more impact on the communities, on the policies. I think we can do a much better job. So I think we have benefited from your discussions. But before we officially conclude, I want to extend again our deepest gratitude for the discussions, for the panelists, your time, your wisdom, your dedication to public service. Your leadership is a source of admiration for all of us. Also, I want to thank the team and the volunteers who served this event, and of course to each of you in the audience for your thoughtful participation. And also thank our co-sponsor of the event, New Jersey Policy Lab, financially supports this event as being a great partner with the school. Thank you so much. And as we leave tonight, let's carry the energy and lessons of the discussion tonight, whether you are a student, a citizen, a scholar, a practitioner. We all have a role in building a strong, more equitable future through public service. So thank you all once again for being here tonight, and look forward to seeing you in future events. Safe travels and have a wonderful evening. Thank you.